There's a moment in every legend's life when the world holds its breath, when the cameras stop, when the crowds go quiet, when the man behind the myth finally stands alone, and you see him not as a hero on screen, but as a human being carrying the full weight of a lifetime. Sylvester Stallone is 79 years old, and what's happening to him right now, what he's been carrying behind closed doors, away from the spotlight, away from the roar of the crowd, is something that will stop you cold. This isn't the story Hollywood wants to tell. This isn't the highlight reel. This is the raw, unfiltered truth about a man who fought harder in real life than Rocky ever did on screen. A man who built an empire from nothing, who clawed his way out of rejection so brutal it would have destroyed anyone else, who lost things, people, relationships, pieces of himself that no amount of fame or money could ever replace. But here's what nobody is talking about. At 79, something shifted. Something changed in Sylvester Stallone that even his closest friends didn't see coming. And when you hear what he's been facing, what he's been quietly carrying all this time, you are going to feel it deep in your chest. Stay with us. Because this story isn't about a movie. This story is about a man. And it's one of the most powerful ones we've ever told. Before the fame, before Rocky, before the world ever knew his name, there was a boy who nobody believed in. Born on July 6th, 1946, in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of New York City, Sylvester Enzio Stallone entered this world in a way that almost felt like a prophecy. Complications during his birth caused partial paralysis to the lower left side of his face, his lip, his chin, part of his tongue permanently affected. That slur in his speech, that drooping expression that people would mock for years. It wasn't an affectation. It was a scar he was born with. Imagine carrying that into childhood, into school hallways, into auditions where casting directors looked you up and down and said, not subtle, not kind. You'll never make it with a face like that. His parents' marriage was volatile. His father, a hairdresser with big dreams and a short fuse. His mother, Jackie, a flamboyant astrologist who loved him fiercely, but couldn't always shield him from the chaos at home. Sylvester and his younger brother Frank were shuffled between foster homes and relatives during some of the hardest years of their lives. He wasn't the kid teachers celebrated. He was the kid they gave up on, expelled from schools, told he was slow, told he wasn't cut out for much of anything. But something burned inside him that no teacher, no rejection letter, no cruel word could ever extinguish. He loved stories. He loved the way a great film could make a broken person feel seen. He loved the idea that one man, standing alone against everything, could rise. So he chased it, relentlessly, desperately, at great personal cost. He moved to New York. He was so broke he slept in a bus station for 3 weeks. He sold his dog, his best friend, his companion, because he couldn't afford to feed him. If you know that story and it doesn't crack something inside you, listen again. He sold his dog for $50 because he was starving. That's not a movie scene. That was his actual life. He took any acting work he could find, bit parts, extra roles. A soft-core film he later admitted he deeply regretted, made purely because he needed the money to survive. And through all of it, he was writing. Furiously, obsessively writing the script that would change everything. A story about a fighter who nobody believed in, a man from nothing who refused to stay down. He wasn't writing fiction. He was writing himself. When Sylvester Stallone sat down to write Rocky, he finished the script in 3.5 days. 3.5 days, fueled by desperation, by hunger, literal hunger, and by something that can only be described as divine, creative urgency. He knew this was it. He could feel it in the very bones of the story. He could feel it because he had lived every single word of it. The moment he brought it to producers, the offers started coming. And they were real offers. Good money. Life-changing money for a man who had been sleeping in bus stations not long before. But there was a condition. They didn't want him to star in it. They wanted Ryan O'Neal, James Caan, Burt Reynolds, established names, bankable faces. Not this guy with the drooping lip and the thick accent and the zero credits worth mentioning. And here is the moment that defines everything about Sylvester Stallone. Here is the moment that separates the legends from the people who almost became legends. He said no, every single time. No, over and over again. The offers climbed. $25,000. Then more. Then significantly more. Money that felt like the sky to a man who had nothing. And every single time he looked them in the eye and said, "If I'm not in it, it's not happening." His wife at the time begged him to take the money. Friends thought he had completely lost his mind. And honestly, in any rational sense, they weren't wrong. But Stallone understood something deeper. He understood that Rocky without him in it wasn't really Rocky at all, because Rocky was him, and selling that story without selling himself into it would have been the greatest betrayal he could commit. Not to Hollywood, but to the kid he used to be. They finally caved. A budget of just over $1 million. Stallone would star. And what they made in 28 days of shooting would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Rocky didn't just succeed. It became a cultural earthquake. People who had never cried at a movie wept at Rocky. Working-class people, fighters, immigrants. Anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. They didn't just watch the film. They felt it like a personal message delivered directly to their soul. Sylvester Stallone went from sleeping in a bus station to standing on the Academy Awards stage in what felt like the blink of an eye. He was nominated for Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay simultaneously. Only the third person in Oscar history to receive both nominations for the same film. And then he bought his dog back. That detail. That one beautiful, heartbreaking detail. He found the man he'd sold Butkus to, standing outside a 7-Eleven. He offered him $100. The man said no. Stallone offered $500. Still no. He ended up paying $15 Zotan dollars and giving the man a role in Rocky just to get his dog back. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about who Sylvester Stallone is at his core, nothing ever will. But here's the thing about reaching the very top. Nobody warns you about what comes next. Nobody tells you that the higher you climb, the more exposed you truly become. And nobody prepares you for what it feels like when the people you love most become the casualties of your rise. The 1980s turned Sylvester Stallone into something almost beyond human. Rocky, Rambo, Cobra, Demolition Man. The man was a franchise unto himself. His face was on lunchboxes and posters in bedrooms across the entire world. He was the action hero of a generation, the living embodiment of strength, resilience, and American grit. But behind the muscles and the movie posters, the man was quietly fracturing. His first marriage to Sasha Chak had already ended. 2 sons, Sage and Sergo. Sage, his eldest, inherited his father's fire and his deep love of storytelling. Sergio was diagnosed with autism at a young age, and Stallone became one of the earliest, most passionate advocates for autism awareness, long before it was a mainstream conversation, long before celebrities lined up to attach their names to causes. He did it because it was his son, because it was real. But the marriages kept breaking. The relationships kept collapsing under the weight of who he was and everything his life demanded. Brigitte Nielsen. The tabloid chaos. The years when the personal pain grew so loud it competed with the very soundtrack of his success, and the roles started getting harder to find. The action era that had made him a god was slowly ending. The 1990s arrived, and suddenly the world wanted different heroes, smaller stories, more ironic, more self-aware. Stallone's brand of raw, sincere, chest-forward heroism started feeling, to some critics, dangerously like a relic. He made films that didn't connect. The reviews were brutal. The box office numbers were humbling for a man who had once been completely untouchable. He could have retreated. Honestly, most people would have. But Sylvester Stallone has never once in his life known how to retreat. He reinvented. He pushed through. He took the punches and kept getting up, which, if you think about it, is the only thing he has ever truly known how to do. And then, in 2006, he did something that the entire industry told him was career suicide. He came back as Rocky Balboa. He was 60 years old. The film had no massive budget. The critics were already sharpening their knives before it even opened. The narrative was already written. This was a desperate nostalgia grab from a man who simply couldn't let go. They were wrong. Rocky Balboa was quietly magnificent. It was mature and aching and honest in ways the earlier films never dared to be. There's a scene, and if you've seen it, you know exactly the one, where Rocky speaks to his son about life, about taking hits, about never blaming the world for where you end up. That monologue wasn't written just for the film. It was written from the deepest, most scar-tissued part of Sylvester Stallone's actual lived experience. Every word landed because every single word was true. Audiences responded. Critics softened. And a man who had been quietly counted out stood up once again and reminded everyone exactly why they fell in love with him in the first place. Then came Creed, and if Rocky Balboa was a quiet comeback, Creed was an outright roar. Watching Stallone in that film, older, slower, battling cancer on screen in a story that felt uncomfortably close to his own reality, was one of the most extraordinary performances of his entire career. He received a Golden Globe. He should have won the Oscar. He didn't. And the way he handled that disappointment, with grace, with humor, with that particular quiet dignity of a man who has lost before and knows how to stand tall after, said absolutely everything. Now we have to talk about the loss that broke something in Sylvester Stallone that even Rocky could never fix. On July 13, 2012, Sage Stallone died. He was 36 years old. Sylvester Stallone lost his firstborn son, the boy who had his eyes, the boy who had grown up on set, who appeared in Rocky V alongside his father, who had developed a deep and serious love for film, not just as an actor, but as a filmmaker, a preservationist, someone who genuinely cared about cinema as a living art form. The cause of death was coronary artery disease. Sage was found alone in his apartment. He was 36 years old. There are no words. And Stallone, this man who had built an entire career around never showing weakness, who had constructed his whole identity around endurance and strength and the absolute refusal to go down, was completely shattered. He rarely speaks about it in any detail, but when he does, you can see it. The way his jaw tightens, the way his eyes drift somewhere else for just a moment, the way even now, decades later, the grief is still right there, sitting just beneath the surface, permanent and total and unmoving. Grief like that doesn't resolve. It doesn't get better in the way people promise it will. It becomes part of you. It slowly changes the architecture of who you are. And for Stallone, losing Sage reshaped everything. How he thought about time, about legacy, about what actually matters when the cameras are off and the credits have finally rolled. In the years following Sage's death, something quietly shifted in how Stallone moved through the world. He became more reflective, more open in interviews, about vulnerability, about regret, about everything a career built on relentless forward motion quietly costs you when you're not paying close enough attention. He spoke about moments missed with his children, about the way ambition, unchecked and unexamined, can hollow out the spaces where real life is supposed to live. He wasn't performing humility. He was genuinely reckoning with something deep and irreversible. He married Jennifer Flavin in 1997, and despite the very public, very dramatic separation filing in 2022, which sent genuine shockwaves through the media, they reconciled. They renewed their vows together in 2023. 3 daughters, Sophia, Sistine, and Scarlett, a family he has been, by many accounts, fiercely and deliberately protective of, in ways he perhaps wasn't always able to be in the earlier chapters of his life. Because here's the real truth about Sylvester Stallone at this stage. He is a man actively, consciously choosing presence over performance, choosing the dinner table over the red carpet, choosing to be known, really known, by the people who will carry him in their hearts long after the world has moved on to the next thing. And then came Tulsa King and the Expendables franchise, and a creative energy that somehow, impossibly, simply refuses to slow down. At an age when most men are winding down, Stallone is still producing, developing, starring in brand new projects, not from ego, but from what appears to be a genuine, almost urgent need to keep creating, keep telling stories, keep leaving something meaningful behind. So what is actually happening to Sylvester Stallone at 79? Let's talk about it directly, because this is the part that matters most. This is the part that explains why people who grew up watching him on screen feel a particular, inexplicable ache when they see him now. He is visibly older. That's not an observation made with cruelty, it's said with the deepest possible respect. Because watching Stallone age in public is watching something genuinely rare. A man who built his entire identity around physical power, now confronting with apparent dignity the one opponent that no amount of training can ever defeat. He has spoken openly about chronic pain, about the physical toll that decades of performing his own stunts, actually performing them, not stepping aside, not letting a double absorb the punishment, has permanently left on his body. His shoulders, his back. The accumulated, compounding damage of a man who refused to ask for help when his body was screaming for it, because the role always demanded he push through anyway. He has had multiple surgeries. He has faced the kind of physical deterioration that comes not just from age alone, but from a career spent treating his body like a machine purpose-built for war. And yet, you watch him in interviews, you watch him with his daughters, laughing, present, genuinely and fully alive. You watch him speak about his paintings, because yes, Sylvester Stallone is a serious, prolific painter, a fact that surprises people, but perhaps truly shouldn't. And you see something that completely transcends the physical. You see a man who has finally found a relationship with himself that the younger, hungrier, desperately proving version of him never had. There's a particular kind of peace that only comes through suffering, not the comfortable peace of someone lucky enough to avoid the truly hard things. The real peace. The hard-earned peace that has been purchased at enormous cost, paid for in loss and failure and regret and grief and the slow, humbling realization that strength was never really the point to begin with. Connection was the point. Love was the point. The quiet moments that never make it into any documentary, those were always the point. Sylvester Stallone at 79 is a man who knows this now, deeply and completely in the very marrow of his bones. He is using his platform differently. He's been outspoken about preserving film history, about the importance of storytelling as a genuine form of cultural inheritance. He speaks to young filmmakers, young writers, young people who feel unseen and deeply underestimated, with a specificity and warmth that makes absolutely clear he has never forgotten what it felt like to be exactly them. He posted a tribute to Sage. He shares photos with his daughters. He talks, when asked, about what he wishes he'd done differently. And he doesn't hedge, doesn't spin it, doesn't dress it up. He just says it with the quiet honesty of a man who has finally run out of reasons to perform. The Paramount Plus documentary Sly, released in 2023, gave the world an unguarded, unfiltered look at who this man actually is beneath all the mythology. And what it revealed was deeply, unexpectedly moving. Not a broken man, not a diminished one, but a full one, full of contradictions and tenderness and hard-won wisdom, and a love for his family that burns quietly and constant, like a light left on in a window for someone still coming home. At 79, Sylvester Stallone is still fighting, not for championships, not for box office records, for time, for meaning, for the chance to be truly known before the final bell. If this story moved you, if something in it reminded you of someone you love or quietly of yourself, then sit with that feeling for just a moment. Because Sylvester Stallone's life isn't just the story of a movie star. It's the story of what it truly means to keep going when every reasonable voice around you is saying stop, what it costs, what it slowly builds, and what, at the very end of it all, actually remains. The trophies fade, the box office numbers become trivia, the muscles soften with time, but the moments of genuine courage, the dog he bought back, the script he refused to sell without himself in it, the son he lost and still carries, the family he is choosing every single day to show up for, those are permanent. Those are the real legacy. We don't know how much time any of us truly have. Stallone knows that better than most. So maybe the question this story leaves you with isn't really about him at all. It's about you, about what you're still quietly carrying, about who you haven't called yet, about the thing you keep putting off until you have more time, more money, more courage. If you felt something watching this, share it with someone who needs it right now. Leave a comment about who in your life this story reminded you of, and if you haven't already, subscribe, because we tell these stories for exactly this reason. To remind each other that the most powerful thing any of us can ever do is simply refuse to give up. Just like Rocky always said, it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.